What's up, YouTube? It's your boy, it's Cholula's Comics, back again with part 2 of my weekly installment for Wolverine Wednesdays. Apologies for the previous one. I should have finished it all, but I couldn't do it in time. So here it is. Without further ado, let's get into it. So I neglected to do this in the first part of the video, so I gotta do it now because we always want to give credit where credit is due. And this is the wonderful team that brings us this really awesome story arc. Writer of Chris Claremont. We have the penciler now, John Buscema, who actually takes on the brunt of a lot of the early Wolverine storylines. We have the inker, Al Williamson. We have letterer, Tom Orzechowski. We have colorist, Glennis Oliver, who I guess unfortunately split with Glenn Wein. And you know, that's only sad to see just because she was part of the original team that of her and her husband Glenn Wein you know, coming up with the character of Wolverine. But, you know, she's still in the game and she's still doing her thing, so good for her. We have editor Bob Harris, and we have Tom DeFalco as the editor-in-chief. So on to it, you guys. On to the beginning of book 2, which is titled Possession is the Law. It seems that like everybody and their mama's after the infamous Muramasa Blade after the end of book 1. Here we're going to get an appearance by the sensational Silver Samurai, also known as Kenichi Harada, and the former and now depowered Spider-Woman turned Private Eye, Jessica Drew. So at the beginning of this book, Lindsay McCabe, best friend of Gumshoe Jessica Drew, is in one of the seediest parts of Madripoor. She's there to meet with her fake contact, who, if you guys remember from the first part of the book, that was the guy who pretended to be the now deceased Kojima, who was the right-hand man to Lady Mariko Yashida. So she's trying to meet with this guy in order to get more information on either where Jessica's at or try to get her hands on the blade. Instead, she finds Bar, and she's trying to discuss with him what are the next steps. What should we do? How are we going to find Jessica? Patch, as you guys know, he don't take no crap, and he's not looking for a partner. He tries to talk her out of it, but when Patch sees that Lindsay is not interested in backing out, he tricks her into trying to prove herself by getting her way too drunk for her to be able to tag along on his little adventure. So Patch is able to he gives her the slip, and he makes his way up the stairs of the same bar where they're sitting and they're drinking, where Lindsay was supposed to meet the phony contact. As he arrives upstairs, he steps foot into a familiar scene: death and destruction. These are two things that pretty much seem to follow our boy wherever he goes, huh? And before he knows it, he's confronted by an old foe, the Silver Samurai. Unfortunately for Patch, because of the events that happened shortly after the X-Men storyline, The Mutant Massacre, everyone in the world at this time thinks the X-Men are dead, and he kind of needs to keep it that way. And that means that he can't pop his claws and he can't fight like in the way that he's normally used to fighting. So as most good Wolverine fans are used to seeing, Wolverine gets his butt whooped pretty good right here. And just when he thinks it can't get any worse, we get our first glimpse of the now possessed Jessica Drew. And she's hungry for blood. We get to see a really great three-way fight scene between possessed Jessica Drew, the Silver Samurai, and Patch. And this fight literally brings the house down. It brings the bar down. But more importantly, during this fight, we find out that there's no real semblance of Jessica left, as she's possessed by the sword. Patch states that he doesn't have many friends, and that the few that he does, he holds very dear. But if she really is as gone as he thinks she is, then he's doing his friend a mercy by releasing her from the sword. And he's talking about killing her. With the building down, Lindsay picks through the rubble, and she's able to save Silver Samurai. She saves his life. So basically, they decide to make a pact and move on together in search of Jessica and the Muramasa Blade. While all of this is going on, Patch is hot on the trail of Jessica Drew, who's now super strong, skilled, powerful, with the grace of a samurai, and she knows how to use the blade, and the spirit of the blade is also protecting her. Patch soon finds out that he was right. She's no longer in control of her body or her thoughts or her mind, but instead it's the demon soul of the blade who's down control of her. They have a really great fight scene where Wolverine ends up finally disarming her. As Wolverine wields the sword for the first time, he hears a voice in his head, and the voice lets Wolverine know that he is not only a worthy adversary, but he's also the only person in the world who's worthy enough to wield the sword. Now we get a really cool close-up of Wolverine, the one true master of the Black Blade. That brings book 2 to a close. Don't forget the bonus back cover artwork done by the brilliant Bill Sienkiewicz. And that's an awesome transition into book 3. So that brings us to book 3, titled The Black Blade. With Wolverine newly possessed by the demonic spirit contained in the Muramasa blade, our good buddy Patch is about to solidify his bond with the sword by sacrificing the former female wall crawler Jessica Drew. Can the dynamic duo of Jessica's best friend Lindsay McCabe alongside the sensational Silver Samurai be enough to stop the precarious Patch? Let's find out. I've always been a fan of opening books with full page art on the splash page and diving right into the story with art. This page is a perfect example of that. We see Patch getting ready to make good on his promise to permanently bond his soul with the sword by sacrificing the former Spider-Woman. But very luckily for Jessica, the new team of the Silver Samurai and Lindsay McCabe are not far behind him. While they're not successful in retrieving the sword or even rescuing Jessica, they're at least able to buy some time before Patch could do the deed. A fire starts and everyone has to make a break for it. Down but not out, Jessica decides to go and visit O'Donnell. He's a local business owner and owner of the Princess Bar. The Princess Bar has a huge bit of history in Madripoor and in Wolverine's backstory, but we'll save that for later. She goes to see him for advice as to where she could find not only the possessed Patch, but the rest of the cult. While he himself doesn't have any info, he does have a set of prisoners who just might know where to find Patch. Turns out, it's the same Black Blade cult members that attacked Lindsay in her hotel room at the end of book 1. Lindsay puts on her best set of acting skills and tricks them into thinking that she went crazy in order to get them to talk. So now, with the info in hand, O'Donnell, McCabe, and the Silver Samurai converge on the hidden jungle temple where the ceremonial sacrifice is going to take place. Samurai, who's now grown fond of Lindsay, states that O'Donnell should stay outside and act as a last line of defense, while he and Lindsay take point. As the Silver Samurai and Lindsay take their positions in the temple, Patch walks in with Jessica, who seems to be in some sort of a trance. Lindsay struggles with the idea of taking another person's life, but she realizes that if she decides not to act, she will still be responsible for someone's death. She would much rather that someone not be her best friend. So she decides to take the shot, and she shoots a masked Patch right in the head. The rest of the cult sees this, and a huge fight ensues. As the samurai takes care of most of the cultists, he finally fights the possessed Patch with the Black Blade, one-on-one. The Muramasa blade proves to be too strong for the samurai, and it snaps the samurai's blade in half. Just as Patch is going to strike the now unarmed samurai, he gets shot a second time. This second shot seems to really jar something loose in Patch. It seems to give him just enough shock and clarity to be able to shake loose from the sword's ominous possession. In a very fleeting moment of clarity, Patch casts the sword into the rocky wall past the Silver Samurai. Jessica simultaneously seems to snap out of her trance. Patch, still a little groggy, watches as the Silver Samurai walks over to the sword and takes possession of it. He waits for a change, for the spirit to take over the body of the Silver Samurai. And nothing. The Silver Samurai seems to be the true chosen one, because he's able to control the sword and not the other way around. So Patch and the samurai agree to part ways amicably. No more fighting, no more bickering. I'm out. So they just hope to never run into each other again, which we all know is not going to happen. That pretty much brings our story to a close. We do get a small introduction to the next story arc. At the bottom right hand corner of this issue, we see some small text that says Bloodsport. So that's the end of that story. Finally, let's not forget the key artwork on the back cover completed by the keen Kevin Nolan. So hope you guys enjoy that. And again, guys, thanks for sticking with me through this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you all tune in next week when I bring you the introduction of a couple of lesser known Wolverine villains, Bloodsport and Roughhouse. Until next time, this is Cholula's Comics. Remind you to keep stacking hella comics.